And relocation was basically shipping you off to a large city. For the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, our relatives were shipped off to Los Angeles, to Seattle, and Ferguson, Missouri by St. Louis. My relatives in Chiminising, when they chose to accept relocation, now in 1949 and 50, Chiminising was still tar paper shacks. No electricity, kerosene lamps, and a community cold water hand pump. Can you imagine being put on a train and 4 days later you get dumped off in downtown Los Angeles and said, here's your apartment, here's a factory job, good luck to you, and we are not giving you any means to come home financially. Good luck. We wash our hands of you. Now, my aunties would talk about this all of a sudden. Trains, cars. In this apartment, there's a switch that these things in the roof come on. They're called lights. Okay? They go into the bathroom. They didn't have indoor plumbing. They use outhouses. You know? They go into this thing with two knobs, and they turn it on, and oh my God, there's water coming out. And it's hot water. How does that happen? You know, they were used to boiling water and using a big copper tub to take maybe a bath once a weekend in their tar paper home. So for many of our relatives, they were lost. And that's why many of you also work with large urban native populations. Because relocation forced native people to those large urban areas with false promises of a better life, which they didn't find. Some did the best they could, and some did okay, but culturally, they were lost. And this went on from the 50s and probably to the early 60s. Then the federal government said, well, you know what? There are still too many tribal nations that we have to keep paying for because we signed those treaties in the 1800s and we have that financial responsibility. And you know what? They're just too dang expensive. So the final federal Indian policy was called termination. As in, the President of the United States took a piece of paper and said, one day you are a federally recognized tribe, and next day you are nothing. That would be like all of you in this room saying, I live in this town, I live in this township, and the next day you are nobody. You have no citizenship. You have no identification. You lose all your identification and who you are. And in the Great Lakes region, the tribe that we talk about in this area was Menominee Nation of Wisconsin. They were terminated. Didn't get asked, just terminated. One day they were a member of a tribe, next day they were nobody. They lost everything. And a strong Native woman named Wilma Mankiller fought for 20 years, 20 years to get their federal recognition back in the 70s. Could you imagine yourselves in your chairs fighting for 20 years to get your driver's license back, to get where you live recognized again? Would you have the energy to fight the federal government for 20 years to obtain that? But that's what Menominee Nation did, and they finally regained it. But we hear the stories of many elders, which I've listened to over my many years of service. And the one thing that you will hear all across Indian country is for every federal Indian policy that was made to create genocide within all Native communities, it takes 7 generations to heal from every federal Indian policy. First contact, 7 generations. Treaties, 7 generations. Assimilation boarding schools, 7 generations. And if you're terminated, 7 generations. I have affected by 4 of those. And I will be long in the spirit world before those historical traumas are healed for 7 generations for every one of them. And as you look at trying to outreach into federally recognized tribes or large urban Native communities, you are walking into Native people who have 7 generations of this, we call it historical trauma, within us. And especially not trusting anybody from the outside. Because what they have been lied to so many times is by a group saying, hey, we're here to help. And at the end, they were there to harm more than help. And trying to build trust within a tribal community on reservation or in large urban Native populations is a large challenge, especially for what all you are here for animal welfare agencies. I am so impressed by all these names. I didn't realize so many groups out there, because I only work with 3. But when you look at to say, how can I outreach or build relationship? I will tell you, it does not happen overnight because of the mistrust of the outside world. And the fact that many of our tribal communities, because of our historical trauma, has created a lot of social ills, chemical health issues, behavioral health issues, child welfare issues in our communities. And besides those 3, it also affects the health of our 4-legged relatives, our dogs and our cats in our communities. And the one thing we don't have access to, or easy access to, is veterinary care. Because number 1, we may not have the financial means to pay for it. 2, it's a long drive to access veterinary care if we have a sick 4-legged relative. And maybe the third and most important one is when we walk into that veterinary care and we bring in our reservation dog or cats. What do we experience walking into those facilities? We experience the stares. We experience the grimaces of the other families bringing in the probably healthier animals than us bringing in our tribal animals, because they don't understand the reasons why we can't bring it in. And then we feel the horrendous shame because we are getting stared at by the other customers in there. Then we are getting stared at by the vet techs and the vet assistants and even the veterinarians, because they're going, oh, you're from that tribal community. Huh, yeah. And they see your 4-legged relative, and they go, see, I've heard the rumors, and it's exactly right. Because here's a Native family, and exactly what I was heard for all the rumors or gossips about that tribal community, and here's their dog or cat, and sure enough, it just fits what I heard. Can't take care of them, but that one, bad caregivers, don't care. and they don't want to learn. So we want to avoid being shamed. Because our stories tell us from our old ones for generations that as Ojibwe people, we are born with an internal shaming factor. We are pitiful. That's what our spirit world tells us. We're born pitiful with the way we live life is to try to live life in the word that we call Mino Babadiziwin, or to live life in a good way. We are born pitiful, but we want to end in our lives living in a good way, to go in the spirit world in a good way. So we have to work towards that. But we don't have access to veterinary care because of distance, money, and just flat out, implied bias. We won't do that. And so our four-legged relatives sometimes have to suffer because of that in our communities. So when agencies like yours in this room who want to reach out to us, and they say, well, how do we do that? You have to understand that if you're going to try to outreach to any of the 11 tribal nations here in Minnesota or a large urban population, this has to be a lifetime commitment, because we are used to agencies coming in, giving us a quick show of faith, and leaving. So if you're thinking about trying to outreach to Native communities, this has to be a lifelong commitment, because we have seen failure time and time again, and that's why we don't trust when the agencies come in to want to bring some type of service into our tribal communities or into our urban areas to do that. Because we have that historical trauma, because we have lived with implied bias with that one. So when you come in, you have to come in gently and in baby steps. And I hope when you reach out to a tribal nation, you'll find somebody who does what I do. Well, how did I get into this? Well, it's surprising enough when you're a firefighter, or for me, a tribal firefighter, EMT and emergency manager, when you go into homes for medical calls, for the two-leggeds in the homes, and they have to leave, they go to the hospital, who's going to take care of their four-legged relatives? And so for myself, that's how this began, was trying to take care of my relatives' four-leggeds if they have to go in the back of the ambulance because they weren't feeling well. And then as I did this, then you realize that their beloved four-leggeds had other health issues, and they didn't know how to find resources. So from my helping the two-leggeds to become healthy, they were asking me, what can we do for our four-leggeds in our communities? And really at that time, I had really no resources. But we always say things happen for a reason. And especially in Indian country, we always say our stories tell us, our spirit worlds tell us, things happen for a reason. And for the Mille Lacs Band, that was the University of Minnesota SIRVS program. They were trying to do outreach into the tribes of Minnesota. And somehow, Dr. Lauren Bernstein got my name and reached out and wanted to do this outreach. And I gave her the same speech. I said, if SIRVS is interested, this is going to have to be a lifelong commitment, or I will not allow you to come to the Mille Lacs Band. We have been failed so many times by outside organizations. And the biggest thing I said I wanted is I want to come and talk to all your staff and your students to understanding the unique cultural history of the Mille Lacs Band. Now, with all of you in this room, we always say in Indian country, when you meet one tribe, you have met one tribe. And if you're serving a large urban population, you have to understand there are many tribes who call an urban area home. So when you meet one tribe, you've met one tribe. When we go into urban area, you might be working with members of 30 to 40 different tribal nations who all are coming in with their own historical trauma of their individual tribal nations. So this was a challenge. And so I went down to the university like I'm doing right in front of you. This was 15 years ago now. Jeez, I had dark hair back then. And it was just a cultural talk like I'm doing now. Telling the students, telling the staff, what we don't like to hear is, we're so glad to be here. We hate that. You know, oh, I'm here to help. We hate that. Okay? I said, when you're here for the Mille Lacs Band, you tell every single family that it is an honor to be of service to the members of the Mille Lacs Band. And to understand that if they're sitting in a chair, you do not stand above them. That is an Eastern European dominance thing. You get on your knee and you kneel in front of them to show that you are no better than they are. Okay? Some of our families will not make eye contact with you. That's a cultural thing. Don't take it to be offensive. Understand that some do and some don't, because that's how they were raised. My youngest daughter, Lisa, never makes eye contact. She heard the stories, and that's the way she is. Elders always come first for everything. Okay? Well, who is an elder? Traditionally, the stories would tell us an elder is someone